Presentations continued. Questions from previous day, John Doherty and Ben Burkett.
We want to do roll call because I can't tell who's here and who's not other than who's in the room.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
Ben,
I'm here.
hey Ben, can you do a roll call and see who's in the Zoom meeting, please?
Oh, okay, sure. All right, so Ben Burkett, Finance Director, is here. Do you want me to name everybody else off that I see?
Yeah, that would help.
Okay. I do see Phil Johnson. I see there in the room there, I also see, we're starting with staff. I see Rick Smith and Russ Machen, Mike Green, John Doherty, Linda Smith, and then council members. I think I should let you all just say, roll call yourselves as you go.
Mayor Levy, Mike Levy.
Rachel Medina.
Arlena Yazzie.
David Rainey.
Amy Huckins.
Orley.
Okay, thank you.
Did we miss anybody?
Chief Knuckles is here in the room too.
Oh, okay, thank you. I did not see him. All right, so we can start off. And John, are there any comments that you'd like to start off this evening with?
Just last night went a little long. We apologize for that, but the questions were good and we did make good progress. Tonight will be a little different because all these funds are separate pretty much from the general fund, so they're pretty much standalone. And a lot of their funds are segregated, so you can only spend it in these departments.
Right. And what I'll do quickly is I will share my screen here just as a quick refresh from last night. It is the slide deck that has the budget budget information bar charts here. Last night we talked about the general fund on the very far left. Tonight we're going to talk about all the remaining funds here from the rec center over to the right to the lodger's tax fund. Each fund has it has different types of funds. Either it's a enterprise fund where it runs like a business, or it is a internal service fund. So it's a fund that has services that are provided by and within the city. So, for example, the technology fund provides services to other city funds, such as the general fund, the rec center, refuse, so on. And then we also have special funds. So that's kind of quick. So each of these funds will have one of those categories. And on the top here is just a reminder again, the balance of a zero is down the line down the middle there. Any of the bars that are below that in the red are a deficit. Any of the bars that are above in the green are a surplus for that year. Just to give you a reminder. Quickly moving on to the next slide here are an idea of the fund balances projected for the revised 2020, 2021, and the 2022 by fund. And again, tonight we are going to focus on the funds from being at the airport fund over to the street improvement fund. So that's just a quick refresh, but I did want to give you all, council members, an opportunity. Now you've had a sleep and a day, part of a day to think about last night. If there are any other questions or clarity that you are needing from yesterday's conversation.
The only comment I have is I like John's comment about the expense fund for the council to divide it 7 ways. I never heard of that, but that'd be a good experiment to try. The expense.
Okay, thank you.
Ben, so the funds we're talking about tonight, it seems like they're healthier. Are they just less volatile because they come from a different source and they can only be spent in a certain way?
Okay, so here's another way of looking at it. If you can, I don't know if you can see the slide here. It's on page 15 of the budget book. And tonight we're talking about the enterprise, internal service funds, and the special revenue funds, okay? And it's a mix. Coming back to the screen here, it's a mix. You do see like the rec center fund has planned deficits. Refuse has some deficits. The water fund is positive and has a year of deficit. Now, granted, the 2022, just a reminder, that's more of an indicator. We're not actually approving a budget for that year, but we're giving you a leeway or lead time to start looking in the future. Okay, so it's a mix. So some of it is the nature of the funds. For example, the street improvement fund. The street improvement fund can have a surplus or deficit depending on how much council decides you want to spend. So you can spend nothing, in which case you're going to have a surplus automatically, or you can spend quite a bit and get into a deficit. But the point being is it's more project related based off of the priorities that you all have. So you have a more of an opportunity to control the future destiny, so to speak, of some of the funds. Some funds we don't have much control. For example, the lodger's tax fund. Your destiny is based off the sales tax, or excuse me, the lodger's tax collections that it has, and then the expenditures. And we'll get to the details here, but the expenditures are limited or are more focused, and we don't have a lot of ability to change those. We do have some ability, but it's more of a discussion. Does that answer your question? I believe that was Councilwoman Medina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, or shall we move on then?
As we can move on, Ben.
Okay, that means we're ahead of time already. So with that, we will move into the airport fund. Airport fund is on page 54 of the budget book, is where we start. And we have Russ Machen in the room there to talk through the airport fund.
Good evening, Council. The airport is one of the enterprise funds that Ben mentioned earlier, so we pretty much float our own boat and survive on our own revenues. However, we are in a special circumstance this year and most, if not all, of next year, because as you're aware, several months ago, we were granted the CARES Act grant, COVID-associated grant from the federal government for $633,000. So we've earmarked that funding for paying all of our expenses and then banking our normal revenues, which are reduced anyway. So the only things that are really affected in the budget are, the first item would be personnel. You'll see next year there's a big leap in personnel expenses from 165 to 183. That's because of a payout for my retirement, for unused sick leave, vacation, and so forth. And then it drops precipitously down into 2022 for the same reason I'm gone, assuming a lower paid person comes in to take over. Everything else under the personnel is typical from department to department as far as healthcare, insurance, the retirement fund, and things of that nature. It's all earmarked in an ordinary fashion. There is one small improvement on the line item for administration for telephone. The hotspot Wi-Fi that I used to have in my office, which was the only way I could get internet down there for the last several years, that has been done away with. So that 660 that's put in there for this year is actually going to be about 350. And we are now on a free Wi-Fi from Visionary Broadband because they installed equipment on the airport tower to broadcast in that area. And as a rental fee, they are giving the terminal building and my office free Wi-Fi. And of course, that 660 disappears over the next several years in perpetuity. The only thing I really changed significantly was the general grounds and runway line item. I increased that from a traditional $10,000 a year. I'm finding it's more and more expensive for runway signage parts, light parts, asphalt repair, things of that nature. So I bumped it up next year to 12,000, and then in 2022 to 15,000. That's really the only change going forward into the coming year. Going into capital projects, we're using pretty much all of it is earmarked by the COVID grant. 120,000 for overlaying the parking lot down there. 36,000 for a new pickup. The pickup that I use is 15 years old, will be 16 by the time this budget rolls out. The number 2 pickup for the only other worker at the airport is 27 years old, and it's falling apart. So my pickup will revert to his use, and the new pickup will be for the new airport manager's use. And then the $10,000 for a security camera upgrade. The cameras down there date back to the early portion of the century, single-digit time era, and they're time for an upgrade. There's better technology on the market now where we can get better security. And in an airport, you want the best security you can afford to get. So we'll use some of the COVID money for that. The last item there is the master plan, which we'll detail in more, I'll get to in more detail next week. We've selected a company from the short list, and we'll propose that to the full council next week. All of that is grant money. That's not the COVID grant money, the CARES Act grant money. That is separate money that AIP money, Airport Improvement Plan money, that we've had building up for a number of years, and that we did not use on the project this past spring. On the revenue side, we have really been pinched by not having Hertz Rent-A-Car down there. They're closed. Enterprise Car Rental had a curbside agreement. They're closed. So right now we're down to 0 revenue from car rental with no relief in sight. That's also hurting our boardings because some folks are canceling their trips here because they can't get a car to move around when they finally do get here. So either that or they're not canceling the trip, they're going into Durango, renting a car because they are available there and coming over here. So I'm trying to twist my arm around those folks as much as I can, or twist their arms as much as I can to get a car rental back up and running. I don't care if it's Enterprise or Hertz, just one of them, so we can serve our customers when they get here.
The revenues that Russ is talking about, there's a breakdown of the revenue categories on page 55. Russ, please correct me if I got this wrong, but yeah, you were talking about the grant, for example. I think it was to offset the master plan. That grant is counted for in the mix in the federal grants line, and then is there a portion of that that's state, or is that all federal?
You're asking me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's all federal.
Okay.
A small portion of it will be state. They usually share our match for that, which is 2.5%, pardon me, 5%. So our share would be 2.5%. The state share would be 2.5%. We still have to apply for that grant during the fall process, usually November. So it's basically a slam dunk. It's almost an automatic approval for that type of state grant. Then this year we're spending money, of course, on the project we've already completed. That was over $2 million. Part of that, it encompassed 2 grants. One was 100%. They made any grant issued this year as part of the COVID relief 100%. So we had a $600,000 and some odd grant that was 100% no match. So we we saved some money on that. We turned back a state grant that was matching a portion of that. And then we also have another state grant, which is coming into play in the next month or two to do a seal coat and restriping of most, if not all, of the pavement on the airport. So it'll look like a brand new airport from the sky, all black with nice bright striping here in another couple of months. And that also is that's a 10% state match for state grants. So total funding on that is about $330,000.
I think something just of clarity is at one point Russ talked about $120,000 for the parking lot in the airport. That parking lot, 120 is in the charges and services major line item is where it's accounted for because it's considered a maintenance project rather than a capital improvement. And part of that is intentional. So that way COVID CARES Act will pay for that. And that's why you see that large increase in that in 2021 on page 54.
Russ, did Boutique ever get their rental cars out to the airport?
Yeah, they have on any particular day 2 or 3, but they want to rent to their customers. So if somebody's in town, their car's in the shop for insurance repair, they prefer not to rent to them. They're going to rent to their customers. So it's been up and running for about a month, 5 weeks, give or take. So we do have some rental car, just not to the volume that we could and should.
There's a question about Hertz in general. They're in bankruptcy. I believe they started in the first quarter of this year. And we've never seen any pleadings. They've never sent any to us like the other folks did at Bells. So I don't know what's going on. The Wall Street Journal had an article that Hertz wanted to reduce their fleet size by some astronomical number. And so until they get that done, I don't know what's going to happen legally, whether we have a lease with Hertz or not, simply because nobody's affirmed it in bankruptcy court and let us know. So I don't know what we're gonna do if they don't come back. Are we gonna put it out to bid again? Or I've asked Russ to even see if Boutique could bring a few more cars in, and he's, the rental car thing could be a problem for the next year.
And really, there's only 2 rental cars nationwide, Hertz and Legend. And then we have sub-entities within them. It looks like there's a dozen or more, but there's not. And until those 2 are able to supply cars to the Cortez area, we're out of luck. As far as Boutique, building their bullpen beyond the 2 or 3 they've got, I think they want to kind of test the waters for a few months before they make that commitment.
Russ, what is the average length of stay for our customers at the airport?
The average what?
Length of stay?
I have no idea.
You're not sure?
I don't have any facts on that.
I know it's not like necessarily like renting the car, but like would maybe incentivizing a like ride share service from the airport be something, like have you guys talked about that at all, like Uber or the other one that I can't think of right now?
Or Cortez Cab?
Yeah, or Cortez Cab, or is that already happening?
I do recommend Cortez Cab to folks that are bound and determined to come in and need some kind of transport. Of course, if they need to go to Telluride or other lengthy points beyond, that's going to be quite expensive and mostly beyond people's budget. So, yeah, that's really the only other option we have. I'm not even sure we have Lyft. I heard we had Lyft here. I don't think we had the other. Uber.
I think I might have seen the Lyft car, like one.
Yeah, I think there's one car operating from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., something like that.
If folks dial it up on their app on their phone, they're gonna know one way or another.
What are the rental companies then at the Durango airport? Is it Hertz and
It's the
Enterprise?
same too, yeah.
Okay.
That's really all I have. Everything else is pretty much standard fare as far as the personnel sheet. Of course, the revenue summary and the expenditure summary is just that, things we've already talked about. Are there any other questions I can help you with?
I don't see any
Okay.
questions.
I have a question, Russ, just wondering if there's any news on the old fire truck, any bites on that?
That will be discussed at workshop next week.
David, in case you didn't hear that, he said it'll be discussed at next week's workshop.
I see, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, sir. All right, so now we will move on to dispatch with Chief Knuckles. And dispatch, we are looking on page 58.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. The Cortez Dispatch Center acts as a consolidated 911 public safety answering point, providing emergency communications for law enforcement, fire protection, and emergency services in Montezuma and Dolores counties. The dispatch center is housed at the police department and provides dispatch services for the Cortez Police Department, Montezuma County Sheriff's Office, Cortez Fire, Mancos Fire, Dolores Fire, Lewis Ariola Fire, Pleasant View Fire, Mancos Marshal's Office, Dolores County Sheriff's Office, Southwest Memorial Hospital, and Mesa Murder. So they have quite a variety of users for the dispatch team. And I think they're all outlined in the revenues portion.
Are you wanting to look at revenues, sir?
Oh, I was just saying they're outlined on the paperwork that they have.
Okay. Yeah, if we look on the summary of revenues, I believe that's page 59, that lists I believe like the users or the customers of the dispatch and the related amount of revenues associated to each of those jurisdictions. If you're looking for the breakout of that.
That's correct. That list of users, they're charged by calls for service, a percentage, and that is how the budget for the dispatch center is calculated. The dispatch center tries to run flush, but typically there is surplus at the end of the year, and that's based on call load, department, other agency, the sheriff's office may reduce calls. There's there's all kinds of reasons that the calls for service may fluctuate. COVID. So that revenue is it varies year to year. Any surplus in revenue, according to the intergovernmental agreement, is to be refunded to the user at the end of the year. However, sometimes those are carried over year to year and then adjusted internally if possible. The revenues received, another reason that there's surplus typically, and it's just the way that the calculations come out. The smaller agencies are charged a flat rate of 1%, excuse me. And then the larger agencies make up a different percentage. And typically we receive about 103%. So there's always kind of a 3% overage. So there should be funds returned normally to users, a small amount every year when everything is kind of reconciled at the end of the year. There should be some refunds returned.
The dispatch center operates under the control of the chief of police, and who is responsible for operational aspects of the facility. There is a advisory committee that's made up of users that meet quarterly, assess the services, make recommendations to the chief. I sit on that board, but I sit on it as kind of a non-voting, just as the representative from the city, and to take their concerns. The IGA is signed yearly, so each year the agencies, the user agencies, if they want dispatch services, they have to sign an agreement by November 1st and have that to the city. I spoke with Ben the other day. Lori's here and she helped out a lot too. Kind of a little bit confused on the numbers that you have. There's a couple of different numbers, and Ben and I have been in contact, and we're trying to sort that out. The discrepancy was in the 2019 actuals, so as things carry over to the other years, it's necessary. But we're working on that.
Right. Just a little more clarity. The question comes down to the consistency of not having our audits and having unclear fund balances of what they are. That's part of the challenge there, is we don't know what the true fund balance is until we get the audits done. One other, sorry. Go ahead.
Just so you're aware, there's about $122,206 of that budget comes from the 911 fund that the county commissioners control, and that typically pays for roughly 1.5 to 1.25 FTEs or full-time employees. So there's revenues that come into the budget from that as well.
And that's one of the revenue line items on page 59. Something that Chief Knuckles and myself discussed as well the other day is, as you all are aware, one of the things that started last year was intergovernmental charges from like the general fund for services provided from the general fund to other funds. For example, payroll, HR, city manager oversight, and the likes. Those charges have not been allocated to the dispatch to date, and that's intentional. We really need to, but we haven't. And the reason being is because we understand the impact an increase in expenses would mean that the chief would need to consider turning around and increasing the revenues or the cost of utilizing the services to the various agencies that utilize the service. What that might mean is these smaller agencies like Dolores, Mancus, Louis Ariola, their costs might go up. And so there needs to be more discussion with those agencies to ensure like what's manageable. So it can be, it's accepted. That's one reason why we haven't charged that back. So you won't see that. We should, but we have not charged that yet.
So to follow up with Ben there as well, the agreements that the users are signing currently specify that the city will take care of their finances and things like that, and that no rent or services will be charged to the users. So that's currently how the agreement is. The agreement's been like that, I think, since the beginning, and we're currently operating under that agreement. I know there's Ben's might have conversation about intergovernmental charges and stuff. I spoke with the city manager today, and I think we're going to move forward with that conversation with the governing board of the users. So we're going to have that conversation. Any questions? I think that's about all I have about it.
I feel like I always see a job in dispatch. Is it because it's a high stress job or is it not paid well enough? You know, how come there's turnover? Doesn't seem like an easy job.
It's, yeah, it is not an easy job. It's shift work, it's, nights, holidays, it's like law enforcement. There is a lot of stress in there. You know, I read off the agencies that they dispatch for, and it can be overwhelming in that dispatch center. Not sometimes, but I would have to say most of the time, they're super busy. And, you know, with some pay, the pay's down. I don't know, it's not horrible. Everybody wants more money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's stressful, and there is a lot of trouble in dispatch because of it.
Typically, how many dispatchers work at a time?
2 to 3 at a time. And then if there's a special activity, some special investigation or some fires and stuff, Lori will bring in additional dispatchers to help with that.
When we're at full staff, we will have.
You gotta go to Mike, so.
Sorry, Lori. So when we're at full staff, we have 3 dispatchers on between, at least 10 o'clock in the morning till, 2 o'clock that night, the next morning.
Okay.
So we would prefer to keep 3 on, but it's, like Vern said, it's a high stress job. When minimum wage, I think, is now $15 an hour. They're not making too much. I mean, they start out at $18.80. So.
Okay. And they get benefits?
Yes.
Okay.
Through the city.
Okay.
And when I say through the city, the users pay the city to provide those benefits.
They are employees of the police department.
Right.
So of the city and under the police department, yes.
We commend you for doing a tough job. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Knuckles?
I don't have any. Thanks, Chief.
I have a question for Ben. So what is depreciation? What is this line?
Yes, thank you. I was going to talk about it previously. So the enterprise funds, they have to be treated a little differently. One of which those items is depreciation. In the public world, not the public, I want to say public. In the corporate world, depreciation is usually a line item that what it does is it reduces your you can use it as a reduction, as an expense to reduce your tax obligations. Okay. Because we're a government entity, we have, and these are enterprise funds, we have to calculate the depreciation and we need to account for it. However, it does not help us or benefit the city because we don't pay taxes. So it's not reducing our tax liability, so to speak, right? So simply how I look at depreciation, it is a mechanism by which it forces you to put money away for a rainy day, okay? And what it's meant for is depreciation in this case is, if I remember correctly, it's related to depreciating the software system that the dispatch uses. Okay, as time goes on, that system becomes obsolescent. So by putting away $16,000 a year, you're saying you're using about that much of the life of that system. So when you get to the end of the life of the system and you're ready to replace it, you now have monies in your fund balance to now go and replace it. So it reduces a future burden. It's like I said, I consider it as like it's like a mandate to save is how I simply think about it. So that's why what you'll see is we reduce you have a depreciation as a line item expense. So I'm looking on page 58. Depreciation is $16,000. It's an expense that then reduces against your revenues and makes your change in net position. I then add it back in. So you get a fund balance. It shows you what your fund balance is, right? And it's more noticeable if we go back to airport as an example. Airport on page 54, you'll see the depreciation expense is $275,000. That puts the change in that position at a negative 193,000. Okay, but once you add depreciation back in, it's really a positive fund balance. The fund balance actually goes up from 147 to 422. So it's just a mechanism by which it adds to your fund balance. Good question. Does that hopefully add some clarity?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Barring any other questions, are we ready to move on to Rick?
I think we're ready to go.
Okay. So Rick, we'll start with the Cortez Community Network Fund.
Good evening, council, and I think maybe compared to this time. The community network budget, fiber budget is basically 2021, 2022 is a maintenance budget to keep the infrastructure that we have going still up and operational. For council's knowledge, we actually run two basic networks out of this fund. One being the city and GovNet, which is connectivity between the public facilities, and then also the fiber to the home system, which we call fiber to the business right now. Most of the infrastructure has been built with grants over a period of time, and the government customers on there is Montezuma Cortez School District RE1, and we connect up all of their schools in the city limits. Southwest Memorial Hospital, of course, all of the city buildings, and Southwest TV District. Montezuma County used to be a partner in that, and they pulled out here in the last 6 months. Fiber to the business currently has about 7 service providers offering services using our system, and it's been a good run. We've had several studies done. Last year, 2017, we had a study done by CCG Consulting and Finley Engineering, did an overview of how we want to take this network. And I have to say, as far as the fiber to the home project, there's not many projects that you can take on for a community our size and have what I feel like it could be a very important role for the whole community to do good for everybody. And with the recent COVID outbreaks, the importance of broadband has only been exponentially shown. I would like to also let City Council know that we have been in negotiations based on an RFP that we sent out in the past with a company called Allo Communications. And last Friday, John and myself was on a conference call with the CEO of Allo Communications, Brad Moline, and Nate Burnham, the Chief Financial Officer for Allo, and Dave Miller, Customer Engagement. The call went very well, and they have committed to move forward. They have a copy of our operating agreement that we have sent to them, and they promised us that they would get a red line back to us in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm telling you all this because it looks like it's very promising to be able to offer to the citizens of Cortez full-blown fiber to the home citywide, and multiple services. So we still have some negotiations to do. And also along with that, I would add that we have 3 local banks that are interested in working with the city to provide the revenue bond that would pay for this service. And we have in the agreement so far a mechanism to guarantee that the city's revenues would more than cover the debt service. So this is kind of key, and it's very exciting to hear that the local banks see this as a critical project for the community, and that they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. So hopefully in the next month, we'll be having some special meetings with the city council. One, to introduce new members to ALO and their methodology, and who they are, what kinds of services they can bring. And the other one would be with the banking side of things, so the city council can understand how that project can be funded and built out and operated. The agreement with ALO currently, as it stands, would the city would always own the network. ALO would construct it, operate it, manage it, and maintain it. So based on the studies we've done and our own city pilot project, it makes sense for the city of Cortez, in my view, to go down this path versus trying to run it and operate it, build it ourselves and scale up city staff and bring in the right kind of people, build the infrastructures, billing and back office stuff that it would take. So quite honestly, it's a pretty exciting time. I know it's been a long time getting there, but it's pretty exciting. Back to what we currently have, as I mentioned earlier, the budget is basically maintaining the asset that we have already and keeping services up. We have 3 divisions. We have the administration division. We have the inside plant, which is the network core electronics. Then we have the outside plant, which is fiber in the ground and connectivity at the customer side of the plate. So that's kind of a quick overview. I might add too that this also takes care of the city connectivity for our own buildings. For example, City Hall Service Center, City Hall Police Department, City Hall to Rec Center, etc. Some of the things coming up on the horizon, this would not be in part of the ALO part that contemplated right now, but we're going to have to pay attention to some of the core electronics that runs the city network. For example, the Nexus switch, which is, for lack of a better term, is the main network core switching. It's the main traffic cop that maintains traffic along the city between buildings. That's end of life. And so we're going to have some core costs moving forward in the future. Because we can't afford to go down, as you know, these computer systems anymore. It's your lifeblood of your operations. Some of the items long-term we'll be looking at is pole attachment agreement, since the city will retain ownership of the network. Anytime we're on a pole, Empire Electric telephone pole, or power pole, there's a rental fee for that per year. Because it's the city's network, long-term for over 25 years, that'll be the city's responsibility. We would count for that in the ALO agreement and also in some of the revenues that we plan to move forward. So with that, I'll kind of be quiet on the network.
Rick, could you briefly explain dark fiber to the council?
Yeah, dark fiber and lit fiber are 2 terms that we are throwing around. So dark fiber is simply fiber optic cable in the ground that doesn't have electronics on it. Or if it has electronics on it, it's somebody else putting it on. For example, we may have a vendor come to us and want to circuit from point A to point B.
we would lease them that dark fiber. And that methodology is sold on a per strand per mile basis at a fee, which you said, city council set last November. And the service provider actually puts the lasers and lights that fiber so they can use it. So they're in charge of their own electronics. Lit fiber, in our case, between our buildings, the city lights that fiber and manages it and operates.
Thank you, Rick.
Rick, I just want to say that I'm really excited for where this is going. I think, just considering the current state of the world, it's obvious that having quality internet service is crucial and vital to our area, like to anywhere right now. And it will definitely help make our community more marketable and a place for people to live and work remotely. So, thank you.
I would add, a couple of years back, we did a survey of people around the county on the broadband. And it surprised me that I think if I'm correct, about 27% have a home-based business and they leave. And that was countywide. So that's only going to get bigger as this COVID thing goes, or people working from home. So,
Thank you for presenting, Rick. It's quite hard to hear for those of us on the Zoom side of things. Did I hear correctly that you are getting 3 different bids for operation of the communications? Is there a committee formed for that, or any other involvement, or is it just you choosing?
Rick, just because Amy might be able to hear me a little better, if you don't mind, I'll paraphrase.
Thank you.
If that's okay, Rick. And if I get it wrong, please stop me in my tracks. Okay. So, council members, I'm not exactly sure the timing, don't remember exactly, but it's been a while back. A RFP process occurred, and a company named Allo won the bid, if you so want to call it such, for that RFP. And there's a process underway right now to develop a contract with Allo for them to build out, maintain, and run the fiber network, to expand it from what it is today. And the city, in essence, would own the fiber, we would own the network, but we wouldn't run it, manage it, or maintain it.
Yeah, the RFP went out sometime around January 2018, I believe. Went through a full process. We had, I think it was 7 responses to the RFP process. And we had a committee of people that interviewed and shortlisted those, and then we went into detailed discussions with them. And out of that, we did award it to Palo Communications. Various things have happened, why it's taken so long. COVID, of course. They had some other communities that larger than us that they're building out. This company built fiber to the home in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm sorry.
Put your mic a little bit closer.
You gotta talk louder.
Okay.
And talk louder.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, who's maturity everybody's saying.
Louder.
Kind of lost my train of thought, but the process has been going on for quite a while for various reasons. For example, they're building out Breckenridge, Colorado. They built out Fort Morgan and quite a number of communities in western Nebraska. And they have a real interest in getting into Colorado.
I've got a question about the intergovernmental expenses. It drops drastically in 2021.
Yes, I need to look at the details again on what that is exactly. There was a reason for it. In the meantime, if anybody else wants to ask a question, please feel free.
So jumping back to this ALLO bid, it's been now 2 years and they haven't made good on the contract, or they have started implementation of the build out.
They have been following through. For example, they're had to go in and do a full design of the whole community, street by street, home by home. They went through and did that, and they've been negotiating with Empire Electric on how they can get on some of the poles, because some of the poles cannot take on any more weight as far as loading from cables, and some of them are fine, so they have a process for that. And then these other communities just got ahead of us because they were ready to go. They already had their funding in place, and Breckenridge handed them $14 million out of fund and said, go to it.
If I may, we don't have a contract with ALLO yet. Okay, so there's nothing that they are on the hook for. We're trying to get to the point of getting to a contract, and ALLO has been quite busy. And then also COVID jumping in the middle of some of this contract negotiations has really slowed efforts down.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's what I was wondering.
All right. So Rachel, I needed a reminder, and I see why there was the decrease in the intergovernmental. Not sure when. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there was a loan from the general fund to the CCN fund of about $75,000, and it was budgeted in for reimbursement for the CCN fund to repay that loan off, and so that's why it drops dramatically. It was a $75,000 payment that was a one-time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question or two. At first, when this all started, I thought it was only going to be 6 months. No, I'm just joking. But the question I have is this budget that I've been looking at right here is there's a few numbers that are a little different. Thanks, Rachel, for catching that. And also, what I was looking at here is this is the budget just to keep operating what we have, correct?
Yes.
There's no construction or anything new, correct?
Correct. So any of the, assuming we get a contract with ALLO and we have a loan and then draw down that loan for construction, or basically we don't do the construction, ALLO would do the construction. They send us a bill for the construction, right? So as we draw down the loan, we pay ALLO, and then in a couple of years, ALLO would start paying us revenues from the fiber. Those are not forecasted in the budget.
Okay, that's what I was trying to catch because I didn't see nothing in there, and I was going to say because also I think I thought that they were supposed to put everything up, then work out the agreement on the payment, but that's still a long ways to go. So, but that answers my question on if we're still operating with what we got now.
Right. It's an assumption of continuation of what we do today. No, and it's no growth, no expansion of the current network as is.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. And also, Rick, what is the percentage that we're using this now that we have leased?
Are you referring to take rate?
Yeah, I'm trying to see what all the business is and house or whatever we got now. What's the percentage? It used to be about 30%.
Last time I looked at it, out of the people we're able to serve was about 40%.
Okay, we still haven't hit 50 yet. Okay. Okay, thank you. I was just wondering. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding CCN? Okay. With that, we'll move on to the shop fund. And Rick is still on, and I will go there to the shop fund. Let me find that here. So the shop fund is an internal service fund. And I'll let Rick talk about that, but I just want to make you aware we're shifting gears from enterprise to an internal service type fund. And the shop fund is on page 46 of the budget book.
And Rick, last night, Councilmember Medina had a question about oil changes and stuff. If you could touch on that tonight.
Sure. So, as Ben mentioned, this internal service fund, we call it the shop rotary fund. And out of that, we have 5 employees that are in there, 3 mechanics, the buyer for the city, and the general services secretary. This fund, as he showed you on that chart, beginning chart last night, is kind of designed to break even. We call it guaranteed maintenance, but different terms for different things. But overall, the city's shop rotary fund takes care of just shy of 200 vehicles and equipment. Last year, 2019, the city drove all our vehicles 565,000 miles in Cortez, and we used just shy of 65,000 gallons of fuel. Give you an idea how much goes on to keep the city going. And that includes all the funds. We service all of the funds, including not only general fund, we take care of the water vehicles, we take care of the refuse vehicles, and even fuel the airport. And so this is citywide that the shop rotary fund takes care of. The biggest parts of the budget are kind of necessary to run the city government. For example, $175,000 for the fuel, $95,000 for parts, tires, another $30,000 a year. Give you an example, just yesterday, they changed out a fuel pump in a pickup. And I couldn't believe the price of a fuel pump, $608. So not only is food and groceries getting more expensive, parts for these vehicles, and I would say Marvin does an excellent job of saving the city money. We had a trash truck last year go down, and we had to have a tow clear Farmington to get the work done on the engine. He found a way to get that under warranty. He saved the city darn near $12,000 just on that one transaction, because he found a little blurb on the warranty page because it was emissions. It was on the emissions clause for the diesel. So between him and Brad, they've saved the city considerable money. For example, another one is we got a new street sweeper, the cab air filter to keep the cab clean while they're running in a dusty environment. A new one from the vendor was about $200. They found one for about $35. So they work hand in hand very much. To the question last night about why we don't just go to Grease Monkey or something like that, we do a pretty comprehensive, in-depth oil change and maintenance program. Much more than you get when you go to the Grease Monkey place. They pull the wheels, they check the brakes, and go through all the fluid levels. And then we follow up with the major ones where they'll drain the transmissions and do all of that stuff. So it's quite a bit more comprehensive than what you get there. And our fleet reflects that. And I'm proud to say our fleet that the city has is, for a community our size, is in pretty good shape. One of the things, I'll save that one for the equipment fund, but as things change, we get more and more regulations. About 4 years ago, we didn't have to do DOT inspections because we're a municipality. that rule has now changed. Now we have to do DOT inspections on all the big trucks. And that has to be done annually, and we're talking big dump trucks and things like that. That's very time consuming. So.
What do you mean by DOT?
I'm sorry,
What do you mean by DOT?
Department of Transportation.
Okay.
It's a federal regulation that we have to comply with. The other big compliance item is our fueling system. We have to meet the Department of Oils, Colorado Department of Oils, keep those fuel tanks up so we don't have fuel leaks into the ground and whatnot. That's become quite a compliance issue. But the question comes up, does it make sense? Well, we still buy fuel at the wholesale price, government price, which in some cases are more than what you can buy for a gas station in some cases. Same way with oil filters, we get a government price cheaper than what you can buy it for a parts store because the manufacturer of the filter rebates it back to that parts store to sell it to us. And these are things that Brad and Marvin coordinate with. So we have Marvin's shop supervisor and we have 2 mechanics. Recently, we went through and did a safety rework on all the trash trucks to make them a little bit more safe. And that came from requests from the refuse drivers. So very proactive, and it's a very nice shop for the community on our side. So I don't know what else to really say about the shop.
Rick, do you have to farm any work out, or is most of it done in-house?
I'm sorry?
Do we have to farm any work out the other agencies?
We do, we don't change tires. For example, we have a contract with the local tire shops. We do contract some of the recycling and the solvents and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, if we buy a new vehicle, Marvin's real good about taking it to the shop under warranty. So we have them fix it as long as it's under warranty, and then we kind of take it over from there.
Okay.
Any further questions on shop? Orly?
You said you had Marvin and then 2 mechanics, correct?
I'm sorry.
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty good for that many people. I mean, just 3 guys handling all the fleet. And I mean, I appreciate all the city employees, but like the in-house inspections and everything with all the state laws and federal laws and everything, it'd be best just keep everything in-house. That way they know after they do all the maintenance, because I think they keep a real intensive record of every truck, of every vehicle, I should say, on that behalf. So.
And thank you, Mark. They keep good records, and I would like to let council know as well. The shop rotary takes care of repair parts for like the mowers in parks, the mowers at the golf course. Their equipment is in this fund as well, the repair parts and stuff. But an example of the parks, their mechanic works on it, but we fuel it and repair it. Except for where like a mower blade goes out, that's out of parks. But if an engine blows up, that's out of the shop rotary. Or a golf course, whichever one you mentioned. But it's kind of a concerted effort, very much so.
Okay. So lack of no more questions at this point, sounds like. We will move on to the equipment fund. The equipment fund, we're going to shift gears again. This is a special revenue fund. As a special revenue fund, it means it has a different revenue base, which is sales tax based here. And that's just part of the calculation. It's the same calculation that we discussed yesterday about how general fund revenues were calculated, and the same assumptions going into that for the sales tax revenues that you see here. So we are now on page 75 of the budget book for the equipment fund. All right, Rick, it's all yours, sir.
Okay, thank you. The equipment fund has been a very good mechanism for the city of Cortez since the late 80s, somewhere mid-80s, I would say. The city fathers at that time set this fund up as a dedicated sales tax to go towards a rolling stock for general fund needs. Basically, that would be police, street, admin, city hall, parks and rec. Excluded from this fund, maybe it's either way to put it to you that way. Water fund buys their equipment, refuse buys their own equipment, and the airport buys their own equipment, and the CCM. So all of the general fund vehicles are purchased out of this. And in the mid 80s, when Bill Ray was city manager at that time, city council and them, they lowered that amount to 1/8 of a cent sales tax. It used to be a quarter, and they lowered it to 1/8. So today that generates roughly 300,000 plus a year revenue dedicated to keeping the city general fund vehicles and equipment going. And that is the police department, which all the police vehicles are bought out of this fund. And usually we buy 3 or 4 patrol cars or detective cars or whatever their needs are and on a rolling basis, and we mile them out. And then we first try to move them to some of the other departments that don't have stringent needs. And as we mile them out there, then we usually give them to the auction. I point out too that the funds derived from the auction go right back into this fund. So we have just shy of 200 vehicles in the fleet. 2/3 of those are probably associated with general fund needs. Sorry to say, because of the COVID, the economics, we have not purchased any vehicles out of the equipment fund. We haven't purchased anything in 2020, and we don't plan to in 2021. So as Ben showed you on those early on graphs, that fund balance is going to grow. And but we also at the same time did not feel it was good for the city to go out and buy a whole bunch of new equipment when people were not getting raises, businesses were shut down, things like that. It was a perception decision that the city made. So last night, one of the questions came up about cars versus pickups versus SUVs for the patrol units and detectives. I can tell you, we use the Colorado State bid as a basis for almost for all of our vehicles. The trucks and stuff usually go to the CDOT spec. But for example, a police SUV runs about $38,000 a year. A police 4-door pickup with more room in it comes in at about $32,000. And over years, we used to have cars, 2-wheel drive, and we had a lot of problems in the wintertime, plus storing the stuff. And quite frankly, they can put a bigger prisoner in the back seat of a 4-door pickup than they can the old big Crown Vics and whatnot. So it's been an interesting process that we use. And I think when John first set in on it, we call it the poker game. When we start the budget process, we come in there, we invite all the department heads from the general fund people, and they bring us their laundry list of what they want. And they pretty much go through and say, well, here's how much money we have. We can't afford this year. And you'll find one department say, well, I can defer this. I really need that. And it's at that time is when the decision on exactly what type of vehicle we want per department is decided, and the budget's set as a cooperative effort with all the general fund players. So, but we still, at that point, it gets in the budget, and then, once a year, we send out the bid. And as I said earlier, we use the Colorado State Bid Award as a basis for speccing the vehicles. And then after that, we do a full-blown bid and award it, and of course, get it going. So, but one of the things that's going to be interesting to see is the electric vehicle world come along. It was kind of hard for myself to get too excited about the cars because as a municipality, the biggest use we could have would be in the pickup side. So you can haul stuff and you can move tools around and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how the electric pickups come into the fray. Granted, we could use some of the electric cars around town, but quite frankly, with the way our fleet works, we usually just ship those vehicles that are starting to get wild out for a certain purpose and try to repurpose them and get more life out of them. So it's been a good program for the city, and the fleet reflects that. One of the things on the horizon that we need to pay attention to, we're going to be looking at a new street sweeper at some point. And to give council an idea, that's minimum probably $250,000 just for a street sweeper. So that's where the horse trading comes in. They need a street sweeper, and Vern needs 6 patrol vehicles. We're over budget, so maybe Vern gets 2, and this year we get a street sweeper, but next year he can get 6 vehicles. So that's how it kind of works out. I think John would agree. It's kind of an interesting process.
So have you been looking into electric vehicles?
Are we starting to look into it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We did an experiment years ago. We probably led the charge. We had those early on electric vehicles, the little pickup Japanese kind of things. I remember. In fact, I drove one back and forth on the service center, and you haven't lived till you're going down Road L, 35 miles an hour maximum with Kenworth on your rear view mirror. So, but those were an early experiment, and we purposed them out in parks and sent one down to the airport, and they used them out down there, and they finally just wore out, so we got rid of them.
Are the electric vehicles seem more comparable to our current bids nowadays?
I'm sorry.
Are electric vehicles more comparable now to like gas vehicles in terms of price?
Yes, they're in performance. The ones we first started out with, you couldn't go over 35 miles an hour by law, and you couldn't go down a highway. You could cross a state highway, but you couldn't go down. So things have changed a lot when you look at the Chevy Bolt, things like that. So they changed quite a bit. The challenge for us, though, at getting into it in a big way would be getting the charging stations where there are stations. For example, at the PD, a charging station, at the rec center, a charging station, and for our own use. So getting that infrastructure in place would be quite a challenge.
Have you done any research on like the lifeline of the electric vehicle versus the gas vehicle? Like, would we get more lifetime out of the electric vehicle?
And I don't know the answer to that question just yet, because my thought, the way I look at it, what happened on the back end when that battery wears out? Is it we have to dump $5,000 into it? Or is it a commodity thing, or is it something? So we need to do an analysis, and that's why we haven't really jumped into it that much.
Did Vern say he needed 3 vehicles or 6? 3, okay.
But we're not buying any this year, and there's no
Right.
proposed.
So he's not really asking for them for the next 2 years.
I think,
That's in the budget.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think Vern's point was if we get off the cycle it makes it more of a challenge potentially for his department to perform their daily activities. And then also is if you're doing like I think typically he's saying every year they get 3 vehicles that they swap out, and if you go 2 years without doing anything, you get to the 3rd year, you should have 9 vehicles that you need to swap out. 3 vehicles for the 1st year, 3 vehicles for the 2nd year, and then 3 vehicles for the current year. So now all of a sudden you're out of cycle, which means what point then you're going to have another 9 vehicles again in 5 years or whatever that cycle is that they have. So I think that's kind of what he was just trying to stress. And if he's there and wants to clarify, please do so. I will put it to you. You do have, I think Rick is spot on. It's a perception reason for why the equipment fund hasn't purchased any vehicles for this year nor for next year. However, all it does, it just builds up the fund balance. It does not really save money or affect the governmental operations in any other way. So you do have the opportunity, if you'd like, to go ahead and say, no, let's purchase vehicles or purchase equipment.
So that Ben's right on. So we are building a fund balance. So we've deferred buying police vehicles and the others for, then we'll be coming on 2 years. That fund balance grows, so when we come out of that, we're buying more that particular year. It does take it out of cycle though, because now he gets 6 new ones, or instead of having 2 or 3 every year, he gets them all in 1 year. So it does make a challenge from that perspective.
This is Chief Knuckles. Yeah, the fund does build, and so there wouldn't be a problem with buying 6 vehicles in 2 years. But as those vehicles rotate in 5 or 6 more years, now you gotta buy 6 more. So it kind of defers the problem down the road. And 6 years down the road, that money may not be there to replace that number of vehicles that are miled out.
So I would add that since I've been with the city, this is probably the 2nd or 3rd time that we've deferred. I think 08 was probably the last one that I directly remember, when the economy was really bad, it froze everything. So, and Vern's right, it's just how you manage your fleet. So, of course, the other part of it is if you're growing and your fleet and your needs are growing, you need more vehicles, then it comes along too. So, we're fortunate that the city fathers set this away as a mechanism to keep the city moving along, versus a lot of communities, each police car or each pickup in parts is competing against all their other issues within that department. So it makes it tougher from that perspective. So my hat's off to those city fathers back then.
Rick, are bicycles for the police department under this fund?
No, sir.
Okay. What area are they?
You would want to do the shots on time.
How many bicycles do we have for the police department? Yeah. Chief?
So for those of us online, it was hard to hear. I'll paraphrase if I understood correctly. The question was how many police, where do police bicycles get purchased from, and how many do we have? And Mr. Mayor, if I got that incorrect, please confirm.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
So Mayor, the bicycles are purchased out of the general police budget with line items such as under 5,000 or something where we can afford that. And I believe right now there are 6 bicycles. However, 3 of them are very old. And in fact, when I worked, I think I left the police department in 2005. They appear to be the bicycles that I rode then. 3 of them. So
If I apologize, it's hard to hear, so I would like to paraphrase, make sure we understood it. Is the bicycles are purchased out of the police department's budget, which is in the general fund, and there's about, did I hear 6 bicycles at this time?
That's correct, but 3 of them are very old.
Variable? Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Ben.
Yes. Are there any other questions for the equipment fund, or do you all, we can talk about it at the end of the night. I'll come back. I would like to know if you are interested in utilizing some of the monies but for budgeting for vehicles, or whether you'd like to keep the budget as is. So we can, I'll ask that question at the end of the evening.
And Ben, I'll go ahead and give the council something to think about. Since money is coming in a little better than we had anticipated, I hate those big spikes when vehicles get out of the cycle and you got to buy lots of them at once. I think I would change my recommendation and suggest to council that they buy the 3 police vehicles next year and keep on that cycle.
And I think a question I would ask with that thought process is, since we didn't purchase any vehicles this year, would you want to purchase those vehicles as next year? If the chief says he needs those vehicles, or if that's a need still.
I think it's a discussion between Rick and Marvin and the police chief and
I would add too, that if we were to do that this fall yet, that we wouldn't get them till 2021 season, time when they order them in and we do the bid process, get them in, it would be February, March anyway. We could budget them in for 2021 and get it going, and that way we're kind of working that way.
Again, it's hard. So, Rick, I'm going to summarize again what you said. I believe I understood was we still have the opportunity, if wanted, to purchase vehicles this year in this season. So that might help manage the police vehicle cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll ask that question again at the end of the evening. So are there any questions at this point?
Sorry, Ben. So then, just making sure I caught things. So those 3 police vehicles are not reflected in the 2021 but projected budget.
Correct.
Anywhere?
If you look at the capital outlay line on page 75, and that's what I'm showing here, you'll see there's 0 for budgeted for this year and 0 for next year, but then it picks back up into 2022. And typically, what Rick, when he plans, and Rick, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but typically your plan is to purchase vehicles within the limit of the revenues that have come in. So what that means, for example, is 2021, the forecasted budget is $320,000. Typically, Rick stays within that limit. If need be, if he needs to dip into the fund balance to do a full purchase of a vehicle, let's say, he may go over a little bit some years.
So we have in the past dipped in, and council has always been well aware, when we dip into the fund balance, you see it has a pretty healthy fund balance. But I would suggest, if council's considering just buying police vehicles, that we revisit and look at the needs that they have for the police vehicles, because we didn't buy them this year and we weren't anticipating buying them next year. So we need to have a new meeting with the police department and figure out what if we're able to do it, what their needs are going to be. And of course, it'd stay underneath that allocation. Roughly call it 40,000 a unit. So 6 of them would be 240,000. So I would suggest that we have a meeting, if council goes ahead, and we get a hard number so we plug it in to the budget during this process.
Ben, did he say it's $40,000 a unit, which equals a vehicle?
Yeah. And then
Okay.
if we bought 6 vehicles, it'd be 240,000.
Okay.
With that said, if you remember, a reminder from last night, Chief Knuckles had said the fit out of a vehicle for the police functionality that's needed comes out of the police budget. Okay. And they budgeted, if I remember correct, there's budgets for that this year and budgets for next year. So that's based off of, I'm assuming 3 vehicles, right? So next year, if he gets 6 vehicles, we might need to modify his budget slightly to address the fit out of the remaining vehicles. One of the requests that Rick had asked was if council's intent is to say, let's go ahead and purchase some vehicles, is to try and provide a dollar amount by which that could guide he and his team on which guides the number of vehicles. Okay. Orly, David, any questions?
Yeah, so what
You're doing a great job, Ben.
yes, yeah, appreciate it, Ben.
Yep. Okay.
But you're looking at the 3 vehicles this year and 3 vehicles next year, what you're saying?
That'll be a question. Just think about how if that is something you all would like to do. It would need to be added to the budget. And John, did you understand that differently, or do you have additional guidance or thoughts?
No, that's what I was talking about.
Okay. So then so it's through the rest of the evening, think about it. We'll ask you again at the end of the evening when you go through the recap of items.
Okay,
Or you can have a week to think about it. We'll bring it up in next week's work session. If you would like a little longer to think about it.
I agree.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking at ever since we got everything, try to make it to the end of the year. I don't mind putting it for the next year, 3 vehicles next year, then try to catch up in the future. But right now, in my opinion, it would just be try to keep the budget so we can make it to the end of the year, then predict on the vehicles next year.
Okay.
And then sorry, Ben. So then that line item on the police budget, that could be for the fit out for the 3 vehicles, could then be redistributed, or does it then just get carried to 2022?
It could either get carried into the future for 2022 if they don't utilize it. It just kind of adds to their expenses come in less, right? So it just adds to the general fund balance. It's not a carry forward necessarily for that department.
Okay.
Then if, let's say, the chief has a fit out for 3 vehicles budgeted, but the decision is made to purchase 6, we would need to modify the budget so that way he has the monies appropriated to do the fit out necessary.
Great. Do you have the page number for the police? I'm scanning here.
Yeah, I'll find it here.
Okay. So you have that column on the left.
Yeah, and every electronic copy has the bookmarks. So if you have that, you can find it.
Yeah.
And the police department is on page 32.
And so that would be under charges and services?
I believe that'd be under materials and supplies.
Okay.
Is where they would have that budget in the detail.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So any other questions on the equipment fund?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
I think we're ready to go.
Arlena, can you quiet your cat down, please?
I know we're past due break. Would you all like to? My suggestion is let's do the technology fund. So, because the technology fund is a split between Rick and Phil, and since Rick is still sitting there, we go ahead and do that. Then we have a break after. Or are we all comfortable with that, or would you like to have a break now?
Let's do the tech fund.
Yeah. And then
Sounds good.
Technology fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move on.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so we'll move on to the technology fund, and the technology fund is an internal service fund. And the technology fund is on page 49 of the budget book. I'll let Phil and Rick talk about it, but the technology fund is split responsibility between the two gentlemen. And so I'll hand it over to you all. Phil, I think majority of the fund is you and your team. Might be best for you to start off.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Let me open my file. Okay, the Technology Fund has 3 personnel actually doing the work, and then I supervise, and also there is a position that is shared out responsibilities with PD that provides support. And as you can see, I'm not looking at your screen, Ben.
Sure. Do I need to zoom in?
No, I'm just going to make it, I'm going to squeeze it over a little bit. On the expenditure side, looking at 2020 revised to 2020 budget, 21, I should say. Yeah, there's actually a reduction in costs. And I think that is reflective. We still have the E-Force and the capital outlay. And I think, Ben, we're going to have to look at that. I think in 2022, that's already done.
Okay. Yeah, I think you are correct. Well, I'll put that as a note to look at that again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's that 52K was a 5-year program to purchase and outfit E-Force with PD, and we're done with that. We were able to finance that, and so with the upgrades that we're doing now with COVID, we're not going to be needing any to add any additional capital outlay there. So there will be an immediate savings and all the sharing of the costs and the overhead across the different departments in the city. Personnel services are relatively flat, with the exception of, overhead costs, insurances, benefits, et cetera. Charges and services have gone down, and I'm going to open up my spreadsheet so I can look at that a little more detail for you.
Yeah. So I can confirm, Phil, the capital outlay is including the E-Force, so we do need to drop that off.
Okay,
great. That
That's
drops
good.
off. So for council members, as you're looking at the budget here, the 52,000 for 2021 and 2022 will drop off to 0, and that means the overall expenditures will reduce, as well as in the revenues. The revenues match the expenses, as you see. The revenues will drop off, which means it's a decrease in charges to, let's say, the general fund and other funds, just for your awareness.
So a couple of the deducts. One is we did a penetration test this year. And that is we hired a third-party contractor to try to hack in our Wi-Fi and also to break into our network, which they were unsuccessful in doing. A large component of that is $180,000, which is software support, licensing, and the like. Pretty flat across there. And of course, there's intergovernmental charges. We have to also support finance, HR, city manager oversight. So there really aren't any big increases or decreases in this this fund on my side. I think that we're holding the line. We did have a retirement this year with a network administrator, Ron Smith. We did fill that position internally, and we're still budgeted for the IT tech position this year and next year, which we are now just put it in the paperwork so it could be filled. Are there any questions specifically as to charges and services or materials and supplies? I have that open on my computer in a spreadsheet that I could look at any questions you have.
So just a framework of the technology fund here. On page 50 is IT support. On page 50, on page 51, then is the network administration. IT support is the responsibility of Phil. The network administration is responsibility of Rick. So the questions that Phil can answer are around the IT support, which I am showing on right now on page 50. All right. Rick, would you like to discuss network administration here?
Sure. So this part of the network for cost is basically more of the phone system and some of the network switches around between the city buildings. It's pretty much a maintenance budget. There's no capital in here. We drop a switch or have a big piece of equipment go down, we don't have the funding to replace it. Having said that, I was on a call today. We're currently evaluating on the city's behalf the avoided cost of upgrading our phone system citywide. That cost to put it in the Cisco world would be about $150,000. And we are looking at and studying moving that to a hosted VoIP system, which doesn't get rid of all our costs, but it knocks it down and helps the city avoid that $150,000 hit for more equipment, more smart net. Also, it helps with Bill King's time. That would hand that telecom home system off to a third party that would take care of break fixes, adds and drops. So we're looking at that. Won't really save much money, but it sure saves a bunch on the avoided costs.
Okay, so with that, are there any questions regarding technology fund?
I don't have any.
In city council chambers?
No questions here.
Okay. All right. So with that, thank you, gentlemen. I would suggest we break. I'll leave it to you all. How would you like a 5, 10, 15-minute break? We are keeping in mind we are behind, but I don't see us going until 9:45, 10 o'clock tonight. At this point.
5's good.
How about a 5-minute break?
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So we'll reconvene. Let's just round it up. So 7:45.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Mikey, I'm gonna give these while you're sitting over there. I know you're listening. These all cleaned up for Doobie Sisters. This is the retail.
We doing hydro next, Ben?
Yeah. What I have on the agenda will do hydro, water, refuse, street. However, if you want to modify
Oh, that's
that order
perfect.
anyway, that's fine. But
Oh, that's great. Get the two easy ones out of the way.
Everybody's here.
I think we're ready, right?
Looks like it.
All right. So is everybody back in the chamber?
Still muted.
Let's do it.
Okay. And I heard Orly there. So, all right, we'll go ahead and kick off. So we'll start off with the hydro fund. And the hydro is an enterprise fund. So it's more like a run like a business. So with that, I'll hand it over to Phil.
Okay, everybody. We're in the middle of a 20-year payback cycle with the hydro right now. We have 10 years of 20, and we have been making ends meet. Actually, at the beginning of this, our rates were such that now we have a slight carryover balance, but that's about to end. As we spoke about the impact of the new power purchase agreement with Empire Electric, our rates are going to be cut in half. So that's a consideration that we need to have a discussion about and how we move forward. We will have, I guess, with the 42K carryover next year, half of the income. And then we're also going to have a reduction in this year's income because the rates are changing as of the end of August. We'll have a zero fund balance as of the end of 21. It would be my estimation, Ben.
Right. So I know when we pulled we're doing the budgeting for this fund, we didn't have a lot of information that I think is
Right.
hot off the press, so to speak. Do we need to update and modify? Are we ready to do that at this point?
I would think, yeah, we could just cut that, the energy credits and RPS credits in half to about 35K. And yeah, there's another, well, let's just talk about the budget real quick. And, there are no personnel services. Charges and services are basically, if we have to have a contractor come up, we've had Canyon Hydro come up and do evaluations on equipment and efficiencies. And then the materials and supplies are small components that we have to buy. We have a lot of electronic equipment up there monitoring, doing the conditioning of the power before it goes out to the market. And then we have debt service. What we do not charge against this is any personnel costs that we use in monitoring it on the daily, which attributes to about $4,500 or so. With Rich Landeth and I have estimated that at, but that's all water plant personnel. The building is maintained by General Services with regards to the structure of it as it stands, the paint, the structure itself. So that is a support that comes from General Services, the building maintenance aspect. So the curveball that I got today via voicemail from Empire Electric, I had called up the representative there that I hand delivered the signed contract to, was that at the end of August, we'll be coming and disconnecting our hydro from the grid until that contract is ratified by FERC, which they can sit on for 60 days. And there's a couple things in play here that is really kind of critical. Aside from the lost revenue, which I would rather just give them let that generator spin and give them free power. We have to, in order to meet the Division of Water Resources, Colorado Division of Water Resources, tracking of our use of our water rights, it has to go through the hydro because that's where it's metered. We could potentially put in some ultrasonic flow meters in the flume that goes into our reservoir, but that's going to take time, and we have 2 weeks. The second consideration, and one that is as equally paramount, is that generator cannot spin without producing power and having it somewhere to go, because it will just, it'll destroy itself. Generators are made to push power out, and if it doesn't have an outlet, it will basically ruin it, break it. So we're having a meeting, Rich Landreth, myself, John, and Mike on Friday to try to formulate some kind of an approach to anything that we can do to try to get around this problem. And right now, I don't have one. And it's very concerning for us.
Right.
Aside from that doom and gloom and the loss of revenue and all that good stuff, does anyone have any questions on this? It's a really bare bones budget. Like I said, we're basically making debt service and some small maintenance costs and overhead on it.
Yeah. So another way to look at this is there's a lot to unpack with what Phil had just mentioned. Is I would forget about revenues at this point, is how I understand that conversation, because some of this is new to me as well. Is you can't count on the revenue because there's got to be a lot, so that needs to be worked out with some of the complexities. So if you look at the disbursements, really the only disbursements that you see are the debt service and these materials and supplies, which are pretty minimal. The debt service is, it was a loan that we had taken, I forget with who off the top of my head, and we're paying it back. We have to pay it over, Phil, do you know how long off the top of your head?
This is a 20-year note.
Yeah, where are we at in that 20-year note?
We're at year 10.
So we have another 10 years that we have to pay off, in essence, $69,000 a year. Okay, and we don't want to default on our debt. Okay, for various reasons, just like if you defaulted on your own credit, how that hurts yourselves. The depreciation, I just kind of just take it out, like I said, because it's an enterprise, we got to calculate it. But at the end of the day, really your only expense is this 73,000, about roughly. Okay, so depending on where revenues land, it sounds like there's going to be a beginning in probably even the summer 2021, 2022 forward, it's going to be a deficit every year. That means, and I think what I heard Phil say early on was the fund balance will be used to manage that deficit initially. But once that fund balance is set to zero, we're going to have a plan for how to manage the deficit at that point. Does that mean the general fund is funding it? Is it the water fund that's funding that to manage that deficit and to pay the difference to ensure we can pay the debt service? So that'd be a question, and from what I gather, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have an answer tonight.
No, we don't have a specific answer. We have a couple of tacks. I've reached out to the Colorado Water and Power Authority, and they would be willing to, refund the note to a long term, but of course we have audits in place. So that is not going to happen within the timeline that we're talking about. The other issue is once we make our next debt payment, we make 1 year in January of 21, we'll have, I think, $566,000 due on this note. So that is a number that's hard and fast that we could look at, and what you're talking about, Ben, and how we could zero that out with our lending agency, and then potentially look at a payback within the revenue stream internally. So that's a discussion that we need to have, and then would of course we'd bring it to council for and moving forward on it.
Mm-hmm. So with that, any questions or clarification? Okay, so we'll move on to the water fund. And water fund is on page 81 is where we're looking here.
Okay, water.
Oh, excuse me, page 69. I said 81. I meant 69.
Okay. I know that Rachel had mentioned yesterday when we saw the infographic of the bar chart with surplus and deficit, the water fund looked like it was tanking. And I can explain why, is because we had put out a 5-year capital plan which was based on our preliminary engineering report, and which tied in a $10 million low interest loan. Of course, we're not doing that now, and we're going to have to revise our capital expectancies and how we can get the work done that we want to prioritize within our cash flow. And that's going to have to be an exercise internally with us, with John, myself, and Ben, Richard, and then, of course, council, because it is the preliminary engineering report basically earmarked roughly $18.8 million in needs in order for us to get ahead, get quite not as buried as we are with the aging infrastructure that we have, mainly in the distribution system, our storage tanks, and also transmission lines from the plant to the tanks and from the tanks to the city. So looking at 2021 versus the 2020 revised, our revenues look the same. They're pretty flat. I haven't recommended any rate increases because, as Ben has stated earlier, we really don't know where the fund balance lies, and I don't want to, increase or ask for increases in revenues until we know where that is accurately. So, getting into expenses, we're looking at total expenses of $3.3 million in revised budget 2020, down to $300,000. And where we have cut out a lot of our costs were in capital. Let me open that spreadsheet. So with personnel services, we saw a reduction of, well, I'm looking at an old spreadsheet here, Ben. Can you scroll down to that for me?
Yeah. You like them by major line item, or you want by division?
Well, let's look at them, just the majors.
Okay, if need be, I can pull up the Excel spreadsheet, the template.
Okay, great. Administration is really a lot of our overhead, insurances, providing bonds, and et cetera. And of course, the intergovernmental support that Ben has talked about with regards to IT support is in here, finance, HR, city manager, project management, et cetera. And year to year, 2020 revised to 2021 is actually a small decrease. And, we're really trying to hold the line here. And the reason being is even though if you saw it was a projected really good fund balance, one of the concerns this current health scare and us not wanting to cut off services to our customers is that we wanted to make sure that we had a fund balance to cover overhead. If in fact we had a loss in revenues in maintaining that our customers had drinking water throughout this situation. So that has been our tact, and that's what we're going to continue to do on administration. So on filtration and treatment, we've seen a revised budget reduction from 409 on personnel services to 342. We're allocating out portions of the assistant engineer's position to the filtration and treatment. And since we did not fill that position and we have contracted that out, we saw a savings there immediately. Charges and services are seriously flat, and materials and supplies is a big line for us. It has to do with utilities, chemicals that we use to treat the water, testing for drinking water quality, compliance with the CDPHE, that's the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, and those kinds of things. And we have really tightened up the purse, so to speak, and we're really bare bones. And I'm really, I'm really happy with what's going on out there at the treatment plant. And you'll see when we get into capital that doesn't mean we're not continually handling maintenance, preventative maintenance, and corrective maintenance, and updating equipment as we see that's necessary and it's end of service, et cetera. Transmission and distribution, again, we're looking at reductions in personnel services. Charges and services as materials and supply are flatlined. We have I think we're seeing savings in the personnel side with regards to an open positions, Ben, or, I mean, I'm not certain exactly. I don't have that spreadsheet open in front of me, but again, we're not, there is no fat in these budgets. We are trying to do more or as much as we have with less. And to date, we have, you know, we were only able to really cut, I mean, we cut travel and training, basically what everyone else has cut, you know, where we thought we had latitude while maintaining, you know, safe work environment for our people, as well as a tight distribution system to get the water to our customers. Are there any questions on administration, filtration and treatment, or transmission and distribution?
We're now, just for everybody's sake, we're on page 72 now for meter repair and maintenance.
Meter repair and maintenance used to be a 2 full-time personnel job when we were manually reading meters, and now it is strictly just maintaining our meter reading infrastructure. The charges and services are to you know, maintain our software, you know, our reading equipment, the radios, the meters themselves, and materials and supplies are, you know, nominal. We spend you know, $25,000 a year, and we have over 3,900 accounts that we read on a monthly basis. Well, debt retirements, it is what it is. We have loans out there, but there are loans that are coming up, you know, maturity, and that's where, you know, the long-term low interest loan, it would have been a 5-year project, over $10 million, would have come into play, where our debt service really would not have increased all that much because we would only be paying interest on the amount that we spent over that 5-year process, and then the full note would be funded in year 5. And in that time, we would, I think, I was estimating see about $130,000 increase in debt service, which would then drop off by year 8 or 9. And it would be very close to our current debt service while doing all that that improvement work in the distribution system and at the treatment plant. And on capital projects, and you know, what's really gotten kind of fun with us is that we've done a lot of shuffling in order to maintain that fund balance and dealing with the COVID-19. And so I'm looking at, forgive my squinting, I have 11 by 17s and I'm still squinting to look at these numbers. Like my numbers are 21, 22, and 23, 25, but I know that we backed out a year. So 2021 was budgeted at 337. That includes 180,000 at the treatment plant and 120K in water distribution improvements, and then funding the conservation project at 25 and hydro inspection valve work, which we were going to be taking some valves, actuators, and taking them to the surface through a concrete structure so operators wouldn't have to go into a confined space. They had to manipulate how the water was flowing after the hydro. The 2022 was 2.47 million. Okay, so that number actually was where we had pushed out the PER work. And I'd like to, you know, once you guys get your feet under you, I'd like to sit down and actually just have a work session just to specifically discuss the preliminary engineering report and what we're trying to achieve and how big in scope what it's actually going to be getting done. So right now that number is can be obviously curtailed back. There's 1.947 of that is actually in distribution. 340,000 of that's at the treatment plant, of which that encompasses tank cleaning and painting. We have 3 2-million-gallon tanks that we use to store water and pressurize the system. And over the next 3 years, we want to clean and repaint and do any repairs inside the tanks, welding, et cetera. And that's a priority for us. So the biggest component is the distribution system improvements. And you know, we need to discuss that because I know that there was, I mean, looking at the bar graph and the infographic that Ben produced, it looks pretty daunting and doesn't have a good forecast for us, but that isn't where we're headed. It's just like I said, this is a plan, and we could, refine that and work, like I said, work within our cash flow and still achieve some of the higher priority projects.
And to build off of what Phil had just said is, you may have years where you have little projects and you don't have a lot of expense related projects, which means you build up your fund balance, and that fund balance is there for the future to be used in maybe in projects such as what Phil is talking about. So I wouldn't let it be daunting, because it may be just precisely you're building your fund balance for a future project that you knew would be large.
And everything water is very expensive. There's just no way around it. So having said that, we can reduce that that CapEx easily by 1.947, and then go into a small list of items that we can pick and choose based on. It's not only year of installation, but there are sticks of pipe that are prone to leaks due to materials or installation practices, or just the age. So I will be revising that with Ben and John so we can get that number, so we don't have that bar chart that looks so.
But and Phil, please don't look at the bar chart as being a negative, because that's not the intent, by the way. Okay.
No, I know, but
okay. I'm also saying that for council members' sake.
it did its job. It grabbed some attention. So
and that it's to have the conversation you're having, right? But this is a great example, coming back to Rachel's question about depreciation. You see, there is depreciation that is calculated, and that depreciation is used to help when you're ready to go, help you save. So when you're ready to go to a project like this, you have monies in your fund balance, because the useful life of like the 3 tanks that Phil's just talking about, they need to be maintained. So that's where that depreciation kind of helps and forces you to save for those days.
So on the other, in 2022, again, we would do a tank work. We would actually replace a transmission line from the plant to tanks 1 and 2, and then also do some internal work that we have doing, like the staff has been doing, replacing valve actuators without any contractor. We buy the materials directly from the supplier. And then as the team has time, they have been replacing actuators, and I think they just replaced their last one. So that project for this year is complete. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions on capital, and I look forward to them. And, I want to engage you guys and bring you up to speed on what we need to do and what we want to do, and get your input on how we should do it.
So I guess there's any questions for the water fund side?
I don't have any.
Thank you, sir.
No questions down here.
Okay. We will move to the refuse fund.
Okay.
And the refuse fund is on page 65 of the budget book.
Okay, everybody ready? Let's dive right in there. Again, this year, with regards to charges, we did not recommending any rate increases, because until I see an accurate and reliable fund balance, I don't feel that it would be prudent for us to be trying to increase the charges to our customers. Our fund is in good shape, and we're doing a good job. The guys are doing a good job. I did want to say that, we have been working a lot with the shop fund with regards to this outfit, and they've been really helpful in addressing my team's concerns for safety, removing potential pinch points. They're not potential, they are pinch points, increasing, lighting, et cetera. And so I'm really grateful, as are they. So, and I'm an avid supporter of the shop fund. Okay, getting into it. Revised budget 2020 on personnel services, we went from 822 down to 757. We did have guys leave that were of tenure. They were getting well paid, and now we have replaced them with some entry level, people, personnel. And we did see some reduction in the overhead for temporary workers, which are now being refilled because of the workload. Charges and services are flat. They have to do with, a lot of that is just landfill fees. The vast majority of that is just for us to dispose of our waste. And materials and supplies as well. There is little to anything left to cut out of these budgets. I did want to also note that the miscellaneous revenue actually has to do with recycling, and as you all are aware, that market has tanked across the board nationally when China shut its borders to a lot of our recycling commodities. We're currently still making cash return on cardboard and some of the metals, aluminum and the steel and tin we bring and dispose of locally. So, and it's a good service. It's I would like to see our residential recycling grow. It actually has, since we had to shut down our public drop off at the service center, and we have backed off on recycling glass there as well as plastics until the county is comfortable with receiving our plastics. And glass is basically, we would take it and crush it and they would use it as alternative daily cover. I don't, and I'm not going to recommend that we take it anymore at the public drop off, but we are recycling glass and plastic from our residential collection. So. Year to year, we've actually, like I said, we went down somewhat from 1.751 million to 1.558, and that has to do a lot with the overhead of senior personnel leaving and getting filled with new collection operators at a lesser overhead. So I'm open to any questions you have.
I have a question, Phil. Any idea, I know this is pure speculation at this point, but when the full recycling program might kick back in?
I really can't answer that, Mr. Rainey. I just don't know what the county is going to do with the landfill, and I understand their hesitancy to have their staff sort things on the floor. Although we bring clean commodities there. We sort them on the route with our new recycle truck. We have separate bins for the different types of plastics, and we can bring clean materials there. The issue with our public drop-off in plastic is that people will cross-contaminate the different dumpsters in our trailer, and so then we have to sort, and it's a hindrance.
I've seen that firsthand.
And so I look forward to a time when we can, again, recycle plastic at the public drop-off, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions for the refuse fund? Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
None down here.
Okay. We will move on to the street improvement fund. And the street improvement fund is a special revenue fund. So changing gears from enterprise to special revenue. Again, special revenue because it is sales tax based revenues. And we are now on page 77 of the budget book.
Okay. So what's the negative miscellaneous, Ben?
Yeah, fair question. That is the CREA. So something we didn't address last night is, so sales tax collections come in. We then 2% of sales tax goes off to CREA, the Cortez Retail Enhancement Authority, to fund that association. So it's a reduction of the sales tax for the portion that's associated to the sales tax that's going to the street. So that happens for the general fund, the street, the equipment fund, and that's just, I believe that's it.
Okay. All right. Again, I just want to let you know that, I know you're probably going right to the ending fund balance. The capital expense, which is increasing again on 21 and 22, was in direct response to the water program that we were going to be proposing with the PER. We do have a detailed program from 2020 through 2024, which is now 2021 through 2025. And the personnel services are relatively flat. They actually went down from, again, from 2020 approved down to the 2021 budget because there are allocated costs that were associated with the engineering positions that are no longer filled, and we are filling that through contract operations. We have that component budgeted in the capital side. So if we do have to task them for specific, projects, it'll come out of capital, not the personnel services on our side for expenditures. Half the position is funded out of personnel services here. Charges and materials have gone down significantly because, again, we're just trying to toe the line and cut as deeply as we can without affecting services. And I think that we've achieved that. Intergovernmental, again, is about the cost share with the overhead for operating special funds out of the general fund personnel. And then we get into the capital outlay. So in 2020, we have budgeted the 1.997. Now, a component of that was the $367,000 was budgeted to fund the South Elm Street extension.
If I may, just to help out council members, Phil, is what I'm showing is a detail of the budget template that we utilize to gather the budget, and it has the detail that Phil's talking about now. So it breaks it out for capital projects line item.
Sure.
And I'll zoom in. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Again, on 2020, I think it's really important to note that, when we spoke about this, the $755,000 there, which was part of street improvements, was the chip and fog seal program. And due to COVID and our concerns for revenues coming in and keeping this project viable, we decided to not do that project and then reallocate $245,000 of that to the CDOT project for the Hawkins signalization and the ADA ramp improvements downtown. So that number actually is going to go down significantly, $530,000, I believe, and then that will go into the carryover balance for 2021.
And for your council member's sake as well, is the capital projects that you see here listed are also in the capital plan that you see at the end of the budget book for the immediate year for 2021, and then the 5-year plan is in there, and the 2022 numbers you see there that make up 2.2 million is also in that capital plan for 2022. Just another way to look at it, and we'll look at that, talk about that a little later as well again.
So moving on to 2021 at 1.997, the $367,000 in street improvements was actually the development of the South Elm extension for that South Park. We were going to be, improving that and using that to leverage some grant funds. So at this point, I think that project's on hold. So we won't be doing that. We do have, and I'm missing the 729. Oh, there it is. Right there. Okay. The 729 at the bottom there, that's where we're going to be reteeing off our chip seal and fog program that we put on hold this year. And I have a graphic I can share with you guys, but I don't need to do it right now. It's a map so you can look at it so you're aware. The $265,000, that is that line that is in capital projects, was a street sweeper. We bought the last one out of the street improvement fund because it is a component of our maintaining the city streets, and it's a big hit to the equipment fund. So in discussing that with Rick and John and Ben, that we think that is the the best use of these monies, and then that equipment fund can take care of rolling stock for citywide, as, as Rick stated, the water enterprise as well as refuse do fund their own rolling stock. So if we were to, I'm sorry, let me get into the normal rotation of monies, is $180,000 on the concrete project, which is our cross share, $30,000 in storm drain work, which is actually a component of the concrete project overall, where we do storm with gutter pans, curb and gutter, because even though it's not a pipe, it's still part of the conveyance of stormwater, and it helps us keep the streets from flooding and the water moving downhill. We have $15,000 in the consultant design component, and also geotechnical services for, I guess it would be, and those are basically testing services. So we maintain that, the materials meet our specifications, that compaction of the roadway surfaces and or trenches are proper, so we don't have a lot of settling and, failures of our brand new road surfaces. Are there any questions on 2021? So what I am advocating that the 367 is going to be going away, right, Ben? Because that South Park project is not going to be occurring next year.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's going to be another savings to this budget, and that'll move that carryover to 2022. So, we're looking, almost 900K will be moved into 2022 by the reduction in the chip seal project this year, and also the South Elm development next year.
So you just want it moved over?
Well, yeah, as long as, if it's there, and that's the plan, absolutely, because we're using that money, like I said, to help leverage grant funds.
Yep, and we'll get, and that's what we discussed last night, was the park being pushed off to 2022 for construction. So
Right.
if you're aligning that time frame, yes.
Great. So are there any questions on 2021?
I don't have any.
I'm down here.
No.
Okay, great. So again, on 2022, oh, you don't want to go into 2022? That's fine.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, I guess I'm just ready to go. No.
Okay, no worries. I mean, it's going to be
2022 for you.
Okay, so on 2022, again, we have $760,000, and that is for chip and fog seal program that we put off for a year. We have a 3-year aggressive program, and then years 3, 4, and 5, we have year 3 is actually identified as a section in the city. 4 and 5 are benchmark, are just bookmarks with that fund balance and that money and then we'll go out and then find specific areas that need that work. The 1.215 construction is actually for it's $400,000 of that is, I don't know if I'm looking at the right year because I backed off the years. We have a cold plane milling of 4-inch asphalt mat from Mildred, from Main Street to Montezuma, and then the intersection improvements at Montezuma and Mildred, as well as doing the Mildred Street from Empire to the county line north through the hospital area. We'll be doing that after we next year, where we eliminate the old water line in the middle of the street. So rather than replacing an existing water line, when we have a transmission line across the street, we're going to be saving money by extending the water lines east side of Mildred across the street and tying into a transmission line that's newer, and not having to rip up everything, and then we can just rebuild the street infrastructure. And again, we have the $180,000 in concrete cost share, $30,000 in storm drains, and capital equipment, which is what we use to, if we have to replace a milling machine or a trailer or whatever, we have that. And if we don't spend that money unless we need it. So that's just a bookmark. And we don't spend money, because if we don't, it goes away. We know that this fund, it just carries over and we can utilize it in following years. And again, this is a talking point with you all. I'd like to share out this information with you so you can digest it and making educated decisions. And I like talking about this stuff, so it's not a problem. You have any questions?
Nothing down here.
I don't have any.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bill,
Okay, so now we will move on to the Recreation Center Fund. The Recreation Center Fund is an enterprise fund. And let me make sure we get there. So again, it's kind of meant like a business, so to speak, to take care, and it's supposed to have revenues that cover its expenses. And we are on page 62. And I see Dean, and Dean, I'll hand it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Ben. Good evening, City Council. With the Rec Center Fund, we have the sales tax revenues, which we're familiar with, program revenues, which that's directly from the patrons that use it. Then the intergovernmental line is an inter-city loan to pay back for the City Hall renovation project. So that will be paid off in 2021. And miscellaneous revenue, Ben, can you help me on that one, what those amounts are for?
Yeah, so here now on page 63, there's a detailed breakdown of the revenue of each revenue line item. So the miscellaneous is really investments and other miscellaneous sales and fees that just kind of pop up.
And this is just primarily investments, and it's what the majority.
Yeah, exactly. So
And
there's
then on the expenditure side, I think they pretty well take care of themselves. I think I want to focus on the capital outlay. We had a project this year for $17,000, and that was to cover curtains that divided the gymnasium in half, and it was getting to where the one we had wasn't functioning properly. So and it's been a nice addition to get a new one back in there. And it operates differently, so I don't think we're going to have the same issues with the new one as we had with the older one. So also too, you can see in 2022 we have capital outlay for $50,000, and that would be to reposition the front desk so it's facing the front door. So that's more of a security issue, safety issue. So that also too, that our customer representatives are engaged with the patronage as they come in the door. I think, notice overall, I think the rec center was built really well, but I think that was an oversight to not have our front desk facing the front door. That's pretty typical in most facilities, and it just is a more engaging environment with your staff and takes care of a lot of safety issues as well. I think one of the other safety issues is that we have our child watch or after school program, and that's one of the first rooms as you come in through the hallway, and it would be better monitoring if there was a situation that cropped up with a young child, and just having another set of eyes. I guess any questions on like the front desk project?
If I may just briefly back up to the revenues, just a note is what you'll notice, the revenues decreased from 2021 to 2022. That is because a couple years ago, a new tax, what do you call that? Went to the voters to approve the taxes. The current tax rate is 0.55 sales tax, and it decreases to 0.35 in 2022. So that's what that decrease is. The intent of the decrease is the 0.55 should cover the debt service, which you see debt service that's paying down the loan to have built the rec center. That disappears in 2022. And so the thought is the 0.35 sales tax is to just really support the day-to-day operations of the rec center. So just to help provide some clarity and light on that.
And I think when that tax gets paid off, maybe at the zip code party that John was talking about last night, we could celebrate possibly the paying off of this debt service. Another thing to throw in the party. Also too with the.
I have a question real quick.
Sure, Orly.
Right. Like the rec center right now, the reason it's running because of that tax, correct? This tax revenue that we collecting.
Say that a different way. I didn't quite understand, Orly.
Okay, because right now you said it was 0.55.
Yes, sir.
So right now that's the only reason we're still doing good at the rec center. But when it drops down for the new vote, how much do you think there are going to be any revenue to make up for that?
Yeah, so it goes from, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. The tax collections, the percentage just changes. It goes from 0.55 to 0.35. So we will still be collecting sales tax revenues to support the rec center operations. So when you look in the 2022 budget there, it goes, it's $986,000 in sales tax revenues. It's lower from the prior year because about, let's just say $500,000 because of that change of going from 0.55 to 0.35.
Yeah, it's about the same difference. Once you take the debt service out, Orly, it should be close to the same amount. Once that debt service is removed, it should be close to the same amount as what it was used to operate the facility.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was reading it right.
Yeah, did we answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect, thanks.
I think on page 63, there will be some modifications to this year's revised budget. It's, or at least more even so, probably next year's revenue budget as we go through to know how much impact COVID made with the rec center. I can give you an example that we've to date lost about 800 memberships. And I would ascertain we would have probably close to 400 memberships left. So that's been a huge impact on how many people use the rec center. We have about 100 and right now we're averaging about 106 people a day. And prior to COVID, we were probably closer to 250 to 300 people. So it's a pretty significant impact. And as we go through, we're starting to bring back fitness classes now and you know, we'll see as we go through, but we definitely don't want to take too many moves too soon either. I mean, we've tried to be very cautious and careful about what we allow at the facility, and it's a big responsibility to make sure we're not doing steps before they should be offered. So a lot of our fitness classes right now are outdoors, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a big issue with folks about exercising with a mask on or not, and especially if they're doing a fitness class and it's rather strenuous. I think, you know, that we'll see when we get to the later months when it gets colder where everything will be at. But I don't see right now much changing with our tier system with the rec center on us going to another tier anytime soon. I just think it's the responsible place to be right now. We'd like to offer more, but I think it's just the responsible place to be right now.
So to quickly paraphrase is the revenues on the rec center that we're looking at in detail on page 63, there's an assumption that the revenues, the budget assumes revenues get back to normal, meaning pre-COVID normality. However, Dean had just said that they will watch the actual revenues they come in, and if we need to revise these revenues next year when we get to the budgeting process for the revised 2021, we will do it. And Dean, if I misunderstood this, you're going to continuously watch as we go through, and if there's anything of concern, you'll bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, if possible, I'd even like to probably update those revenues for 2021 before this budget gets finalized. I think we could get a little closer on the numbers to get more realistic numbers headed into 2021.
All right, so just give me your revised numbers and I will be happy to make those changes.
Yep, you bet. And I just think it's going to be somewhere in between where we're projected at the end of this year to what next year's was. It's going to be somewhere in between that. You know, one of the big things I'd like to point out too is if you look down on the revenues again on page 63 is Healthways and Silver Sneakers. That's a huge revenue for the rec center. It's a lot that it's made predominantly senior population. But if you look at the numbers like for 2019, that was close to $48,000. And that's, I think we are having still some Silver Sneakers that can use the facility, but we're not offering any classes because again, we've had, or I shouldn't say again, but we have had 60 to 65 people, seniors in the class, and it's just, again, not allowable and not a responsible thing to do at this point. But we would like to bring that back sometime, and that is a huge revenue driver for our recreation center. I guess with that, is there any questions? You know, we are on limited, I guess I should mention too, we are on limited hours from 5:30 to 7 o'clock Monday through Friday as far as the overall facility, and then 5:30 to 2 o'clock for lap swimming. So that's our two different timeframes that we offer to the general public. You know, back prior to COVID, we were open about 90 plus hours a week for just general use of the facility. So that's a big difference on how many hours we offer. And I think if we see some more growth, we could see some additional hours, but I think we would have to see more use of the facility to do that. And
Yeah, Dean.
Yes.
I have another question. Sorry to interrupt you again, but like you're saying on the revenue and like the memberships that we had before, I mean, they're still there, but they couldn't get into the rec center. Then they bought the membership to use certain equipment and whatever, and we couldn't produce on it. Was there any refunds on it or even paid back, or we're going to do extensions or?
Good question, Orly. We actually did extensions of passes. So the time that we were closed with the facility, nobody got charged for their rec center pass, and it was just then extended. Their membership was extended, you know, and we have done some refunds. And if once the facility opened back up and people didn't want to use the facility at that time, then we issued the refunds.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to bring up from yesterday's discussion too, I think with John Brooks doing a marketing plan, I think that would be a very effective use of his services too, is to market the recreation center back to the public in some form or fashion, so we can try to engage to get hopefully a lot of those memberships back. And we want to probably do some promotional packages, you know, to reintroduce people to the center and to re-engage them in that facility.
Dean, when did you plan to move the front desk, reposition it?
That'll be in 2022.
2020.
Yeah, just we realized next year is going to be a tight year, and we just didn't feel like it was the right timing to do a capital project at that time.
Okay.
Okay, so any other questions?
I don't have any more things.
Okay, we will move on to the Conservation Trust Fund. And Conservation Trust Fund is a special revenue fund. Dean, would you like to go ahead and go from there?
What page is that on then?
Oh yeah, thank you. Lapse of a moment there. We're on page 73 of the budget.
Okay, I'll try to do this in justice on, so the Conservation Trust Fund is administered by the Department of Local Affairs, and it is a special revenue fund that works off of our lottery dollars, and each municipality, county, special district that qualifies under Title 32 receives these conservation trust funds on a per capita formula. So based off of how much population your particular entity has, then you get so much each quarterly, 4 times a year. We usually average around between $85,000 and $90,000 a quarter. So that's what we usually garner from the lottery towards.
Sorry, was that a quarter or for annually?
Oh, excuse me, that's annually, and then per quarter, you know, 40 or 22, $23,000 somewhere in that neighborhood. So with that, the funds just can go towards parks and recreation. So it is designated for specific uses, and there's a lot of scrutiny under this fund because at one point in time it was misused, not in Cortez, but in other areas of the state. And so they've done a really good job of tightening the uses of this. You can't use it for administrative purposes, can't use it to fund a ball team. And that's one of the things in Denver, I think they were using it to fund some ball teams and just not using it appropriately. So they've done a nice job of auditing and giving you a list of do's and don'ts of what you can use this money for. So this is, I think, for a lot of communities in Colorado, a lifeblood of matching dollars whenever we look at grant funds. And a lot of times we'll tap into these funds. I think one example in particular is our pickleball court project. We used about all lottery dollars, which was the conservation trust funds plus the GoCo grant we got and individual donations. And I could safely say that at least the intention was that all those funds would be lottery dollars and private donations to do that project. And I think that's a pretty strong statement to your community that when you can not use, in some cases, tax dollars to fund everything. And again, these dollars, once they're eligible, once the audits are completed, will be a good springboard for our South Neighborhood Park project and being those same leverage dollars to use with grants. I know, Orly, like you talked about, I think there's several different grants. We're just waiting when we have the opportunity to apply. Community Health Foundation grant and several others that we will definitely go after to leverage money for that South Neighborhood Park. And this funding base will be a key piece in that. I guess any question with, or Ben, do you have anything else with the Conservation Trust Fund?
I think just to add additional clarity and awareness for several of you new members, the Conservation Trust Fund revenues are one of those revenues that we're not able to receive because our audits are the status of our audits. Once we submit the audits, we will get the monies that are put in escrow, so to speak. They'll be released for multiple years that we should get. That's what you see here is in 2021. We may get hopefully we get the monies at the end of the year. Of course, you all will be apprised of how the status of the audits are going. But assuming they get complete, we hope we get that released at the end of the year. And then the capital outlay that you see there in 2022 is really using that fund balance then for if I remember correct, the park project. That's where that's going towards. So that's what that capital project is that you see there in 2022.
If I'm not mistaken, Ben, I think the last quarterly payment we received was the first quarter of 2018.
I don't have the number off my head. I'll try.
I'm pretty sure that was from looking back at that, I think that was the last payment we received. So from there forward, 2018 forward, we'll have that money coming back in arrears.
So are there any questions regarding the Conservation Trust Fund? All right, I'll take that as a no. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to the Self-Insurance Health Fund on page 52. So and I'll be doing this one. So the self-insurance health fund is, if you're not aware, the city is, we're self-insured. Okay, that means we're not going to like a health insurance companies to pay and to help us manage our funds, our insurance. We collect, there's an employee contribution and an employer contribution on our health insurance that become the revenues that are collected. They're the contributions. So that's what you see in the revenues. Here is the health insurance, the employee contributions, and then the dental insurance for the contributions. The expenditures, really the charge and services, is the claims on our insurance. Okay, there are mechanisms in the self-insurance fund that helps us manage our risk. So, for example, if we had a really super large claim that came in, we have mechanisms that if it's over a certain dollar amount, it's covered by another carrier. Okay, but because we're self-insured, we could really reduce that premium for this other carrier to help us manage that risk, so we're not hit and all of a sudden carrying the bucket for something that we can never afford. Okay, so just be aware of that. At this time, we're not changing any of the employer contribution rates. So for each employee, there's a portion that's the employee pays, and there's a portion that the city pays. Okay, the city pays about $15.54 per employee that goes into health insurance, and we're not changing that calculation at this time. The reason being is because of coming back to again the fund balances, right? We're not certain what the fund balances are, and so we don't want to make any changes. We know that what we're seeing, the actuals of the contributions coming in, for example, if we look at 2019 as an example here, $2.7 million is what came in for contributions, but the expenditures were $2.1 million. So we added $570,000 to our ending fund balance. Okay, and so that's kind of how we're projecting. Is we're projecting that we're probably going to continue adding to our fund balance. Once our fund balance gets to, or once we know what our fund balances are, and once we know it's healthy, at that point, we will just have conversations with we do have an administrator to help us with the back office of the claims and the calculations of the claims and the negotiations with Medicare and the hospitals and all that. We'll work with them to understand if there are any increases that we're seeing from those providers. And if we're not seeing anything, then at that point we can discuss modifying the employer contribution from 50/54 to down. I'll tell you right now, the city's been it's a pleasant surprise, if you want to say this, and it's unique, I would say, amongst most employers. Our premiums for healthcare have been flat. We have not increased our cost to our employees nor ourselves. So it's been managed, and it'll continue to be managed. Are there any questions on the self-insurance health fund? All right, I will move on. Thank you. I will move on to the lodger's tax. The lodger's tax is a special revenue fund, and the lodger's tax is the revenues that we see here is it's lodger's tax. It's the for every room that is taken up by a tourist or someone who decides to have a party at the hotel or whatever. There's the lodger's tax that's in addition to the bill. Those get collected, and that's what this is. Okay. Then out of the lodger's tax, what we fund is out of charges and services. This charge and services is where, if you remember our discussions with COVID, that's how we fund a half of Mesa Verde country. And that's what you see here, okay, is the Mesa Verde country contribution. Ideally, Mesa Verde country should be getting about at one point, there's a contract. We don't really have a contract today. We need to go through that process again. But we're trying to adhere to that prior contract, which says Mesa Verde country should be getting about $340,000 a year. 170 of that comes out of the general fund. 170 of that comes out of the lodger's tax fund. because of the reduced revenues coming in from the lodger's tax collections, what we've done for 2021 is reduced that amount. When I say that amount, that is the Mesa Verde country, the amount that we will remit to Mesa Verde country, because the lodger's tax really should not operate in a deficit. So that's kind of, it ends up being a plug up to 170,000. The intergovernmental, by our city code, the lodger's tax has to have 5% of revenues, I think it was revenues, has to go to the general fund to pay for administrative services. Then there's also, by code, 15% of the lodger's tax collections has to go to the general fund for beautification projects. So when we look at the intergovernmental, that's what that is. It's two amounts. 5%, that's the goes to city manager administration. 15% that goes to beautification. And that comprises then of our lodger's tax. Are there any questions regarding the lodger's tax fund? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. No. We will move on to capital projects now. And I know this is an eye strain. We're on page 78 of the budget book. And what we're doing here, let me zoom out for a moment. From a format or from a structure of what we see here is on the left-hand side, you'll have each fund listed. Underneath the fund, you will then have the project, a capital improvement project that is expected to occur in the 2020 year under the revised budget, and then the 2021 budget. So as you heard over the last two nights, various departments and various funds have capital projects to them, right? So by putting it all here in a capital project list, you can see all those projects in one fell swoop, one easy, albeit small page, small numbers to see. So as you go down, like we talked this evening about the airport fund, and for 2020, Russ has two projects that he's working on that he talked about, the taxiway shoulder project and the seal coat. Whereas then in 2022, you heard Russ talk about the pickup truck, the security camera, and then the master plan. Okay. What we've done here is to help show you how much of that project is funded by the city. What we do is we show you the investment amount. That's the project amount. Then the next column over is a grant amount. The grant amount then is how much of that project would be funded by any grants. So looking at the airport, it's easy to see, looking at that taxiway shoulder project, 1.6 million is the project, but 1.5 million of that is grant. The difference then of 40,000, that's how much the city will need to fund that investment. So that's not, in this particular case, we're getting a pretty good deal for the project, right? It's $1.6 million, but we're only paying $40,000. And then also as an example, we talked about the master plan under the airport in 2021. There was $473,000 project, but $450,000 of that is grant related. So now the city is on the hook for $23,000. Whereas when you look at the pickup truck, there isn't a grant, so the city is paying for that full amount of $36,000. So it's the same process and concept as we go down to each of the projects. So this is a good way for you if you needed to get your head around the capital projects we talked about the last two nights. This is a good way for you to come in and be able to see that. Last night, if you remember, the last thing we spoke about, one of the things we talked about was the golf course parking lot. And if I remember correct, that was we said we would put $225,000 in the budget for 2022. So this schedule that you see in front of you will be updated accordingly for that. Are there any questions about this page before we move on, or clarification?
I don't have any.
It's great to see it written out. Thanks, Ben.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, then page 78, let's see here. Oh, that's the same thing. Now, on to page 79. And again, I apologize for how small the numbers are. But it's from a timeline perspective, I think it's valuable to see this way, okay? And let's talk about just the structure of this page in here just a moment. Did I get off here? I did. Okay, so what we have again is on the left-hand side, you have each fund. Underneath each fund, you then have a project title. I'll zoom in. Okay, so we can talk about like the general fund, for example, here. So we have the fund, and then we have a project title right below it. Off to the left then is we go 5 years from starting in 2021 out to 2025. And then it's the same structure as we just saw before, whereas the first column, here, let me just scroll up. Oh, come on. The first column will be the total investment amount. That's the investment into that project. The second column is any grants associated to that project. And then the third column would be the net city funding. All right. So that way you can see at a high level what the expected costs are for the city. And then as you go, and what this does, it gives you a 5-year view of where you think we're going for our capital improvements over the next 5 years. This is an example of the schedule that you see in front of you. This is a best practice. And John had noticed, and when he immediately started, that we didn't have a capital improvement plan, a 5-year capital improvement plan. And so when I came on, he asked me to lead the way. And this is one of those things I understand that was used to be done. If you remember when we talked with Duncan and Chris a couple months ago, we used to do a 5-year plan. Somewhere along the way that fell off. So now we're bringing it back. The reason why I'm saying that is because it's kind of a new for us again, our maturity in budgeting 5 years out, we need to improve it. Okay. It's not going to be, we could do more work to make it tighter numbers, better numbers. But the farther out you get, keep in mind the estimates have the probability of them being accurate goes down. So just keep that in mind as you go out. Additionally, there are things on here that may be like, and when you get into 5 years, that we have no intention of doing, or we do, but we don't know where we stand with it. So it's kind of a placeholder or a bookmark, so to speak. For example, in the general fund, there's the library expansion here. Okay. Library expansion is put out to 2025, and it's really more of a placeholder to put a pin in it to have the discussions. If it's something that needs to happen or wants to be done, more discussions have to arise on like how does it fit into the overall plan? Does it fit into your all's priorities and whatnot? But it gives you an idea as a placeholder, something to think about. Any questions regarding the 5-year plan? John, do you have any comments or anything you would like to add?
I just have one thing is on that 5-year plan. I'm glad to see something like that again.
Yeah.
On my behalf.
Yeah. Thank John for that one, seeing that.
That was early one, John.
My question is, and I'm having a real hard time to read it, but you said the grants was the first one there. Does that include, for particularly the airport, the grants would include the feds money and the state's money?
Correct. So here, let me zoom out a little bit here. So like this master plan, for example, the first column is the total investment of the project. So in this case, it's $473,000. The grant of $450,000, that is just the total grants all in, whether it's state or fed. So, but the amount that's remaining for the city to fund is $23,000.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yep. Something that I would like to add in, I don't quite know how to do it from a structure formatting is whenever you do a project, there's also typically upkeep or maintenance or operational costs that get increased that you may not include. I'd like to be able to provide some insight into what that may be. For example, last night we talked about the South Neighborhood Park. Okay. As that park gets built out, we're talking about some funding and project work in 2022, and then some more project work in 2024. Well, as that gets built out, our operational costs are going to go up as well to maintain those projects. Right now, this schedule doesn't show or give you any idea or indication of what the operational costs increase may be. So as you look at the projects, keep that in mind. There will be operational costs that need to be accounted for when we do the budgets.
And as I said last night, it's not only going to be an increase in parks, but it's also probably going to be an increase in police department. And, maybe streets, and it's more than just what's obvious. And so keep that in mind.
Okay. Well, I can tell we're almost at the end of day 2. We've thrown so much at you. There are less questions now. And that's okay, because it is a lot of information. Before we move on to the recap of the evening or the last 2 nights, is there anything here on the capital projects, or questions or clarification? Okay, I'll take.
Ben, I just want to agree with what Orly said. It's really instructional to see this 5-year plan in print there. So just kind of giving us an idea what's going on in the city and what our plans for in the future. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. All right, so let's just kind of move on. If we can take, we're really at the end of the night. We're at 9 o'clock. We're 15 minutes past when we were originally planning on adjourning. So we can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go through the recap of the last 2 days and questions. For me, for this evening, and John, I'd like your comments as well. I took a couple notes as we went of things that I need to modify or update from a budget perspective as we discovered through the evening that we discussed. For example, the hydro plant cutting the revenues in half at this point. So I have a bunch of some of those notes that I will take and update. But those came from the department heads. I don't remember hearing anything from you all as council members. So I'd like to give you a moment to bring that up. There was one thing I just had to go back to my note here. I found it. Do we want to address the vehicles out of the equipment fund, or would you like to think about that and discuss it at another time?
I think I'd like to see the 3 police cars for next year. I think just 3. Or, and have general services look into what they really need and how much it would cost. This is Rachel.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah,
This is Mayor Mike. I agree with Rachel. I think the 3 police vehicles, rather than waiting and getting 6 of them later on, would be cost prohibitive. We do it 3 now, soon.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to jump in there too, because if we wait, the cost of the vehicles is going to go up. I have a strong feeling. So I think we'd actually be saving money by, say, investing in at least 3.
Okay. And Orly, if I remember correct, you had the same thoughts earlier?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I agree on that behalf with the 3.
Okay. And
yeah, I don't like playing catch up. I think stay the course, go for 3.
And Arlena, do you want to add anything? You don't have to.
We didn't purchase 3 this year.
Correct.
So then we would technically have to purchase 6 next year still, right?
To get on the schedule, yes.
To be on the schedule, so we would still need to purchase 3 this year, and then also purchase 3 next year to stay on schedule.
Yes.
And we'll be purchasing it in this budget, but it won't be coming in until 2021. So we'll still have 6 vehicles, but we'll be purchasing 3 in each budget.
Ben, can that be done?
If I remember correctly, and if I think I see Rick in the off there, is I believe he said we could purchase the vehicles this year, the 3 vehicles, but they wouldn't arrive until next year.
Correct.
And next year we purchase another 3 vehicles, and they would arrive within the period next year.
But can we approve a purchase this year in a meeting like this?
You can approve. Well, we can put it back in the budget for this year, and then when we approve the budget formally is when the appropriation is set, and at that point, Rick could go and make the purchases. And I think if I heard him correctly, he said he can make the purchases in October, November.
So the problem is this, the state bid hasn't come out for the next vehicle building year. So if we were to order them right now, they can't build them at the plant because they're finishing up 2020 model years and rolling out 2021. We normally get the specifications and be able to order around the first of the year. The other part of it is a budget problem. If we budget them for 2021, then we can start that bid process and award it in January. We could get the bid out because they'll be producing them and in that new model year. And then in January, we could award it because it's appropriated in the correct budget. That's part of the biggest problem that we have this time of year. They're shutting down the production lines and gearing up for the next model year. Plus, because they're patrol vehicles, police vehicles, those specifications change almost every year on what's available. So that's kind of the reason I was hoping that you would move them and allocate them into 2021. I can get a head start and get them in an appropriate year.
Okay.
Are allocated for 2020?
Most of the, like General Motors or Ford or whatever, their production lines are already full. We couldn't get one and we give them people tomorrow.
What I'm trying to say is, did you allocate to purchase 3 vehicles in 2020?
No, I'm suggesting the city council allocate them in the 2021 budget because we're already in 2020.
So
for 2021, then we could be off to the races.
if I may, to summarize, we're too late for the 2020 budget year to purchase the vehicles. If you wanted the vehicles, you'd have to add them to 2021. Is that correct, Rick?
Or amend the 2020 budget?
You can amend the 2020 budget, but we can't get them. And then,
Well,
we have to.
but what I heard you say though is you can put it in the 2020 budget, and then you wouldn't execute the contract until 2021. From an accounting perspective, that does not work. Because you wouldn't place the bid, you wouldn't receive anything until next year. So it's the matching principle in accounting wouldn't allow that to happen.
Okay, so then by that logic, we would need to actually still purchase 6 vehicles next year since we didn't purchase 3 this year.
Correct. We need to order them in 2021 and buy them and pay for them.
Well, okay, because my idea was like, I know we're behind a year.
Turn your mic on.
I know we're behind a year, but I think we should not purchase any this year, but only purchase 3 next year, and then evaluate 2022 once that gets closer and see if we can do 6 that year to actually catch up or stay behind.
Correct, and that's why I was suggesting that we get with Vern and see, since we didn't buy them in 2020, let's see what the new needs are, because usually they have a detective car, and patrol car and whatnot. Let's see where we're at, whatever council feels appropriate for 2021, then we'll start that process again, because the police department's not the only department that needs vehicles. So that way we can get back into our schedule of prioritizing the whole fleet, not just police.
You may not be able to buy 6 vehicles in 2021 because other departments have.
I'm not suggesting that.
Okay, that's a just,
Yeah.
that came up somewhere, so I just wanted to throw that out.
But unless other council members want to.
And I'm just thinking about 2022 and how much stuff we're kind of showing off into that year. I mean, I still think we should purchase vehicles next year, the 3 vehicles at least, but I'm just trying to envision how we're gonna make things work for 2022. And then that's just what I'm thinking.
Well,
So if anybody else wants to chime in.
So in 2022, if council so chose, because the fund balance is going up while we're waiting, we'll have more money, so that'd be a year that we would spend more than what our annual tax brings in. We bring that fund balance back down to the normal level. And we have other needs. For example, there's a rough mower at the golf course that's got an ungodly amount of hours on it, about to wear out. They needed it actually 2 years ago, we've been deferring it. So there's a lot of needs in the city, and I would like to see us be able to try to address all of them in 2022.
Ben,
Yes.
can you paraphrase what he said? Something about something was wearing out at the golf course.
Yeah. So there's a couple things he said. I'm not sure where you couldn't hear.
Specifically, we're catching up if we're trying to, something about the golf course.
So where it started off was because we're right in front of you on the screen is the equipment fund budget again. Okay. So because we're not having a capital outlay for 2020 or 2021 at this point, we're growing the fund balance. Okay. So when we get to 2022, you could draw down that fund, have a larger capital spend on equipment that's greater than the revenues that came in because you've built up that fund balance for a couple of years. Okay. And then Rick had said there are other needs throughout the city, not just the police. For example, I forget exactly what type of equipment it was, but there's a piece of equipment out at the golf course that is about to wear out, and it probably should have been replaced about 2 years ago.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Yeah. So I guess I've heard a couple things. I think I think I needed one more person, a consensus of having 3 police vehicles in 2021.
Yeah, I don't know if I confirmed, but yeah, I would say go ahead with the 3 cars for 2021.
Yeah, I go with that also. This is Mayor Mike.
Okay, so Arlena, the mayor, I think Orly, Amy, I think you said yes. David, you said yes. And Rachel, I think you said yes as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we will add 3 police vehicles, and I'll work with to the equipment budget here in 2021, and I'll let Vernon and the chief and Rick work through that and give me a number what to throw in here. So I think that was the only item that was kind of an outstanding item. John, was there anything on your part that you believe was outstanding?
Oh, I believe that was it.
Okay. So let's just take a quick moment, give you all open questions, comments, recap for the last 2 nights. Fire hose is done for now. Okay. I'm going to take that silence as, no, we're tired.
Now, Ben, I
Yes, sir.
would like to thank Ben, the finance department, the department heads who put these numbers together and hashed them out with Ben. Obviously, with COVID and everything else going on, it was difficult on everybody, but we are ahead of schedule. And that's a good thing because you still have time to think about things. After this stuff, we will put it out to get public input, and then we will bring it back for formal adoption. But we are on schedule that we set several months ago, so things are going really well so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there we are. With that,
I just want to say, I can say, like, I've been going to several budgets, but I appreciate everybody cooperating together. Appreciate council and everything, working on everything. So opinions are good, and I appreciate it. I think we got a pretty good grip on this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
And thank you for council for answering, asking all the questions. This is a good time to be asking these questions.
yes, absolutely. Okay, so with that, I believe we're concluded. Any?
Good night.
Sorry, Phil.
I said good night, man.
Good. All right, so I don't think there's any official parting words other than we'll talk to you again soon, and thank you very much for everybody's time.
Just wanted to say thanks, Ben. Good job.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you all. Take care. See you again soon.